Around 2010, a major telecommunications company named France Telecom was ready to downsize. To stay competitive on the global market, they would have to fire 22,000 workers, nearly one-fifth of its 130,000 employees. But there was a problem with firing that many France Telecom workers. The CEO couldn't do it. No, not out of moral objection. Not because he couldn't bear to see 22,000 people become unemployed in France's stagnant dog-eat-dog job market. No, the CEO, Didier Lombard, couldn't fire one-fifth of his workers because they were legally protected. You see, France Telecom started its life as a state-owned company before it rebranded to Orange and went public. Once it emerged onto the global market as a multinational mobile network, the French employees stayed protected by law, as did their state-guaranteed jobs. Yet they were trapped inside a company that now had to operate as competitive, lean, multinational. Oh, and by the way, by 2005, the company was $50 billion in debt. Didier Lombard needed to get rid of enough employees to fill a major outdoor amphitheater, legally protected employees, which meant, in Didier's mind, he had to get tough. 22,000 people tough. Tough like Jeff Bezos. Tough like Steve Jobs. So Didier told his managers to get tough, to lean on their employees, to make them miserable, kick them out of their offices, move them to new job sites, harass them, bully them, make them really squirm, make them want to quit, make them so miserable they'd rather die than stick it out. Or, as Didier said in 2007, quote, by one way or another, by the window or by the door. It was a good tactic, efficient, tough, like any good capitalist. And it could have worked, except his pressured employees started leaving through the window. The bullied employees began killing themselves, blaming the company with almost every death. One man, 28-year-old Nicholas Grenouille, would hang himself with an internet cable in his garage wearing a company t-shirt. But the CEO stayed tough. In the end, 35 protected employees would end their lives, directly blaming France Telecom, before the public and the police began looking into Didier Lombard and his tough tactics. You're listening to The Re-Engineered You. This is a podcast about self-empowerment and all the myths, lies, and misconceptions we tell ourselves. Then we use science and history to bust those myths and re-engineer a better you. I'm your host, Todd Laments, the extrovert.
And I'm the writer, researcher, and introvert, Joe Anthony, whose job it is to dig through the outer layer of no duh on the internet and get us to the juicy facts.
Tough versus mean. As Americans, we all have romantic notions about being tough. Notions of having grit. Being the man or woman who takes what they need and has the confidence to face down anyone who stands in their way. Even people in authority need to be tough from time to time. Managers, parents, doctors, police, they need to be able to summon that toughness to keep from letting their children, patients, and clients from walking all over them. But what about workplace bosses? What about CEOs who literally hold all the keys? Are they being tough or just mean? Is there a difference? Is Jeff Bezos being tough or mean? Was Steve Jobs being tough or mean? Today we're exploring the line between tough and mean. We want to identify when it's justified for a boss to chew you out for your own good, and when they're doing it to be a bully, to increase their profit margin. And we're starting our tough versus mean discussion with a few myths. Myth 1. Mental toughness, meanness, and toxic masculinity. The three get confused with each other all the time. So today we're going to define toughness and talk about why it's important. Myth 2. Skilled CEOs aren't just being mean for the sake of meanness. If it feels like they're bullying you, they must be doing it to get the best out of you. And myth 3. Is there a secret to staying tough? According to drill sergeants and scientists, is there a secret to hanging tough without becoming the bully? We'll answer those questions. But first, Joe and I are going to share our own experience on talking tough or sometimes just plain being mean.
So, Todd, are you familiar with the Johnny Cash song, A Boy Named Sue?
I am.
So, any of our listeners who haven't heard it, it's a country song by Johnny Cash, and it's about a man who is supposed to be tough, like his father isn't going to be around to make him tough, so he names him Sue, and he gets picked on through his life so much, so harshly, he becomes a mean cuss, like he becomes a fighter, basically. Would it surprise you to know that this was based on a real person?
I would never have guessed that. I was just gonna say it's got to be all fiction, anyways.
I thought so too. I figured it was just sort of like a joke between Johnny Cash and the writer. It was written based on a judge named Sue Hicks, and
a man named Sue Hicks.
A male judge named Sue Hicks, and they thought it was so funny they wrote a song. But in real life, this guy was not a mean cuss. He was just a fair judge from all accounts. So we want to talk a little bit about our own experiences with meanness versus toughness. Todd, I was wondering if you had a good example of times you have gotten tough or mean.
About me being bullied when I was a kid. There was this one kid who would just pick on me. His name was Husky, and He was built accordingly. He was a little cement truck. And I'll give you an example, because everyone said someone bullied me, they teased me. I had these pencils that I was very proud of that my mom bought for me that had my name on them. That was Todd. Mm-hmm. So beating me up and pushing me around was enough. He stole my pencils, and then he'd scrape my name off them and then use them in front of me, taunting me.
So you lost your monogram pencils to Husky.
I was devastated.
That is a country song, by the way. If we can put that into lyrics, that'd be amazing.
Husky, if I ever see you, I'm going to kick your ass. I still haven't forgiven you.
So we want to, the reason we're doing this, talking about, by the way, my bully's name was Elvis. What is it with getting bullies with novel names?
They sound like fictitious that we're making up just to pretend we were bullied.
Yeah, we're protecting people, but no, that guy is still walking around the streets of Portland. So for today, we're talking about, we're going to get into individual toughness, how important it is, how it helps you build you as a character. But we're also going to focus a lot on when it becomes meanness.
Well, I had a one, too, in a business that I owned I got to share. So I do one for a kid and one when I was an adult.
Please.
I had a house painting company, and we were, at the time, their number one customer of Sherman-Williams up in Seattle. And my crew, which was mainly Korean and Hispanic, like 100%, was down in Portland. And they called back to get our account information. And the general manager of the paint store made a comment to the man in Portland store, "Oh, do any of those guys speak English?"
Okay.
In a very condescending and there's only one way you can mean that.
Right, you're implying something when you say that.
But he didn't realize that the guy down in Portland was Hispanic.
Oh,
and so he called me and told me what happened. So I did what my anger, over-emotional self always does, and marched in there and threatened to kill him for being racist against my family.
Right.
So is that mean, or is that tough, or is that...
I think that's tough. It could be mean. I mean, it depends if you cross the line into unprofessionalism. But I actually really like that example for what we're going to get into. In our third section today, we will go back to that story, if you don't mind, and we will look at it and we'll use our new rubric that we found. It's a step-by-step on how to tell if you're being a bully or if you're just getting tough. You were an athlete, right, Todd?
I boxed for many years.
Okay. Do you think that, in your experience, do athletes have more toughness than the average person?
I think they do when they're doing that sport, but I don't think that it transfers outside of it.
Okay. So we're going to talk about individual toughness first and why it's important for people to have. And generally speaking, we're going to identify where it comes from. Now, we're going to get into the how-to of our show in the third part. So this is just sort of identifying. But according to Scientific American, there's a really good article, Are You Mentally Tough? They identify that the state of being tough, enough to withstand adverse conditions or rough handling, that's generally what we're talking about. So a boy named Sue is withstanding adverse conditions, aka everyone wants to kick his ass. So they went and they looked at athletes and coaches, and they wanted to ask, is toughness something you learn? So that's going to be my first question to you, Todd. Do you think people are born tough, or do you think they're trained into toughness?
I think it's kind of in their DNA, but then I think it's I guess I have to say both.
Both,
because
okay.
of what they're raised in their environment.
That's a fair answer. I mean, like, sometimes you can see a kid and you can see them already equipped to handle adversity.
I call it strong-willed.
Yeah.
You know, they're kind of that born leader. They talk to you like you're an adult even though they're 4, you know.
Right. It's always weird when you find that too, isn't it? So Scientific American, they looked into athletes, and they found that athletes themselves say that mental factors, specifically toughness, affects 50% of their performance. And their coaches say that mental toughness affects 83% of their performance. And among all factors, they rate it as the most important set of psychological characteristics in determining success.
So that is toughness is. Then the coaches know better than the athletes.
Right. The
They're
coaches,
better evaluators.
Yeah, they can see it from the outside, and they think toughness is the number one factor.
And they can see it in volume. They're not just focused on themselves.
Right. According to this article, they say that self-confidence, attention control, minimizing negative energy, increasing positive energy, maintaining motivation levels, attitude control, and visual imagery are all key factors in toughness. So if you look at those...
So positive thinking.
Yes, exactly.
And positive, that's what I think of, Joe, when I think of tough.
Yeah.
I think of bite their head off, knock them out tough.
We're gonna find that as sort of like a rhyming theme in today's episode, that positivity is really what separates toughness from meanness. And we're going to get into that over and over, but I'm 100% with you. It was surprising to me to find out how much of an optimist you have to be tough. Because tough people, they do believe things are going to get better. Otherwise, why would they tough it out? So we also have our first difference right there that we got to between tough and mean. Self-confidence is toughness. Minimizing negative energy is toughness. Which this is something our France Telecom CEO was definitely doing for maybe himself, but not his people. So that's our first way we can identify that Didier Lombard was not being tough. He was being a bully. Is that there was none of that positivity. There was none of that the positive outlook for the future in what he was doing. He was doing it specifically to get people out of their job, and that's the first indicator. In fact, according to this and Psychology Today, a bully's job is to erode self-confidence in everybody, to maximize negative energy. And that very much sounds to me like that's what he did. Well, I mean, he actually literally said, please bully our people. So it is to erode their confidence.
And he got a whole team of his best executives to do it.
Right. So would you like to go through the 4 metrics or the 4 elements of toughness?
Please.
And I figured while we could go through this, we could actually ask ourselves, do we have this when we're tough? So we can turn this into a bit of a game. I like doing that, where we examine something and say, are we already displaying this? So this is from a recent study by Felix Gillian and Sylvain Labordi. and they compared levels of mental toughness from the athletes to non-athletes. And they sort of distilled it down into these four major traits. So the first one, I'll ask, when you get tough, how do you feel about hope?
It's there. I'm going to get there. I'm
Okay.
determined.
So when you're training, when you're in your athletic days, you had hope for what you were doing.
The outcome that I was going to win. Win
Okay.
the next round, win the next punch, win the next fight.
Oh, that's good. That also that factors into our positive imagery. We listed that above, or Scientific American did. So, yeah, you totally have to imagine a good outcome at the end. The next one is optimism.
Being optimistic, and again, on the fighting thing, is that I'm training harder than the other person is.
Okay.
That he's eating potato chips somewhere.
So your optimism, you're optimistic by comparison.
Yeah, and there's no way anyone could be working any harder than I am.
Okay, I like
Or
that.
working with a better team around him. I remember thinking that. Think, oh, I've got an advantage there. My coaches are better than their coaches.
Right.
So that's optimistic.
Okay.
Says me, right?
Yeah, it says here, yeah, the optimist. That's okay. The third one is perseverance. So when you're tough, do you feel like you're persevering well?
Absolutely. You're creating your own deadlines. You're putting one thing in front of another. You're not letting anything set you back.
Okay. And the last one is resilience.
Being resilient is getting a black eye, getting a bloody nose, having personal problems, but still driving to the gym, no matter what, going to the gym,
Right.
not missing any good meals or any workouts. So yes,
Yeah. Step through the front door of the gym even if you don't touch a machine. So when I read this list the first time, I was like, yes, these are all things athletes do when they get tough. But I also recognize something else, and you might agree with me on this. We do every single one of these when we do this podcast. we have hope, we talk optimism, we persevere, we resilience, we do it every week no matter what.
and our pre-meeting today, we were talking about 31 times we've done this in a row. We're like, pat each other on the back. We're proud of that.
Yes, we are. But generally speaking, these pieces of toughness, toughness, now I understand it by looking at these articles, it's more like an umbrella. Like toughness itself, we treat it like it's one state of mind, but really it's several optimistic states of mind.
Well, in 30 episodes of this is way tougher than 30 days in the gym, even boxing and sparring. I promise.
So that also lets us recognize that toughness is not just athletics. It is something you have to have in pretty much all aspects of life. When you get sick, when you're planning a major investment, when you're dealing with your family sometimes, toughness comes in everything.
I always like to talk about doctors and their residency when they get out of medical school.
Oh, God, yes.
Those 15-hour days, that requires toughness, and people's lives are on the line too.
Right.
And they're at a brand new job.
So you do not have to be an athlete to be tough. You can get tough in any aspect of life. What's more, through these studies, they found out that there was no difference between types of sports, like individual versus team sports, what kind of toughness they are practicing, like even golfers. It's basically, it crosses both physical activities and mental activities, which is kind of nice to know. Okay, so I have one final question for you. Were you tougher when you were a kid, or are you tougher right now?
I think I'm tougher now than I was when I was a kid.
Okay.
You wouldn't steal pencils from me, would you, Joe?
I don't think so. No. I wouldn't steal pencils from young Todd either. I think you might be dangerous at every level, but
it shows you what a pissed off person I was. The fact that I still remember that.
Long memory. Yeah. Well, I asked that question because this study also found that we get tougher as we age. That if toughness comes with positivity, that you have to be able to anticipate a good outcome, that everything you do when you get tough is worth it at the end. That comes with age. That actually comes with maturity, according to this research.
I think with toughness, too, you can ride things out better than when you could younger.
Yes.
You don't quit so soon. You find, use your toughness to work your way through it.
Yeah. I love when your mature folksy wisdom anticipates what the research found, because it says exactly that. They say that people who practice mental toughness actively, they can do an activity for longer on average than athletes with lower mental toughness. So you're dead on. You stick it out. So this is to take all of what we just said in that research, all those three chunks. Mental toughness is not only important in sports, it also helps with resilience against stress and depression, and it's generally a positive activity. Being tough means that you have to be positive and you have to anticipate a worthy outcome. And that seems to be something I anticipate that the France Telecom employees did not anticipate. They were not looking forward to the future, right?
Oh boy, no. It was called by some of the management that worked there, management by terror. And it was people who worked there described it as being marginalized, miscast, systematic harassment that was set up on a humongous, it had over 100,000 people, so they had a system of just bullying and harassing people. The real goal of the executives, Joe, was to destabilize the workers. Have you ever had a job where you don't know what's going to happen next, or who your boss is going to be next, or what department you're going to be in?
We're going through that right now at work. We just had our boss fired, and they brought in an auditor who was rearranging everyone's shifts and schedules. So yes, I have experienced that.
How much micro stress has that caused you?
Surprisingly more than I thought it would. I figured I could just walk through this, but no, it is, anything destabilizing is stressful.
Okay, so many of the people are made to relocate and change their jobs, some of them 4 or 5 times in 3 years. I'll give you an example. There was a guy, he lived in Paris, but he was relocated 280 miles away from his family. And when he got there, he got a job where he didn't have a second of training, and his task and his job wasn't really defined. So they pretty much moved the guy off the planet.
Wow. He's just set loose in an environment and told to figure it out.
Now, people who had worked on the outside in more labor jobs, construction ones, they pulled him out of that, Joe, and plopped him in front of a computer, like a computer engineer.
Okay.
So another thing, too, I'll tell you how you feel about this. What if they would take you from your job now and put you into a sales job like I have with 0 training? How much stress do you think that would cause you?
I would have a mental breakdown pretty much immediately.
There was a sociologist who worked with the employees during the big suicide wave and actually testified at the trial. And he described it as a process of humiliation. We talked about them being protected, just like a state job here in Oregon, right? Those people have nothing to worry about.
Right.
They can't get fired. But even though they were protected, even though there was like a union protected job, they used that bullying to make them think that their job was in jeopardy.
Wow. So they tried to gaslight him even.
So even though that they knew they couldn't get fired, you think, well, I'll just tell them to F off. Who cares? But that isn't how human beings are. We still want to please our boss. We still want to do a good job. Even the threat of it, even if the threat isn't real, we still believe it.
Right. Okay.
Now, on the other side of that, France has very chronically high unemployment. And so this made all the workers know that there was no alternative. A lot of the people that worked there said most of the people who had these jobs, this was their sense of total success in their life. They had a job where they could provide for their family forever. And they worked very hard, and their work was their identity.
Okay, that's important. I was going to ask why this would be so crushing, because for me as an American, my thought before COVID was just get another job. But this was them.
And I'm so glad you said that, because unlike America, the economy through the whole country is poor.
Okay.
So in America, what do? We can move to other cities where there's more opportunities. We always have that options. There's no shortage of opportunities. I always thought Europe was like that.
Okay.
But it's not. A good job is something you can't afford to lose. And so taking your life they would think that that's, more likely than to get in a better job.
Wow. Okay. So that completely lacks the optimism and the picturing of a positive future that toughness allows you to do.
Now, the thing that made me physically ill about this was that, because we've reading through all this, is the different way people end their lives. And a lot of them's in their 20s, 30s, and 40s, the prime of their life, parents. There was a guy who hung himself with a company shirt on. There were people jumping to their death. The worst one, a man set himself on fire in front of his office and stained the wall in front of his office with his ashes.
Good Lord. Wow. So, question. What did it look like when you would get mean at work versus tough?
I would get, like I would say, monkey mad real fast. My language would change.
Okay.
I would say inappropriate things. I would talk faster, more aggressively. I'd be more bossy, less patient.
Okay. I think about half of those hit our identifying rubric for meanness and not toughness. Do you want to go through that? Do you want to look into how professionals identify what's mean versus what's tough? Excellent. So this comes from John Hopkins University, and this is how to identify a bully versus somebody who's being tough. Because for as much as we've talked about bullying in work today, you actually want a tough boss. Because a tough boss is actually looking forward. That they have that toughness positivity. They have that the view that the future is going to look good, as long as everyone has the fortitude and the stick-to-itiveness to do it.
And a tough boss, like you said, Joe, has vision, but a tough boss will also protect you.
Yes.
And get our share from whatever other department heads. They won't. They're not going to step down and let us get walked over and taken advantage of.
Right. I like that you said that. They will shelter their workforce.
Take care of their little ducklings.
Yeah, exactly. So tough bosses, and this is the identifiers from John Hopkins. They're objective and fair, so basically professional. They have self-control, and they're unemotional under pressure. So when you talk about when you got mean and that you were you lost self-control, your language changed, this matches that very well.
I have very low emotional intelligence by anyone's standards. So
okay, we'll factor
that
in.
Too, Joe.
I think after doing enough of these episodes, we're both getting a little bit more mature. But performance focused. That's another thing tough bosses tend to be. They insist upon meeting high standards and holding employees accountable. And the fourth one is they're organizationally oriented. They're consistently operating to achieve the best interest of the organization. So a tough boss is objective, fair, self-controlled, performance-focused, and organizationally oriented. And those are all things that our France Telecom people were not. When we look at them bullying their people, they weren't objective, they weren't fair. Their self-control was really just limited to trying to kick people out or pressure them to leave.
And beyond selfish, a new level of selfishness.
Yes. And when we say performance-focused, they were trying to get rid of people, them putting the wrong people at the wrong job to stress them out. That's not performance, that's just cruelty. So from the same article, How to Identify Workplace Bullies, here are the 4 metrics for them. They frequently misuse power or authority. They focus on personal self-interest as opposed to the organization. They have emotional outbursts. So that one you might recognize that one. And they treat their employees inconsistently and unfairly. So when we talk about France Telecom employees or any corporation, like when you hear about employees who are being treated inconsistently and unfairly.
And that's the big one. Who hasn't been at a company where they treat everyone like a prince or princess except for certain people? And you have to sit there and watch it, and it makes you it wears you out.
I'm glad you brought that up. The treating other people better than you or treating other people worse than you. That inconsistency is a big indicator that you're being guided by a bully at work, not a boss.
And I hate bosses that are sit there and talk bad about Julie all the time, and then you know that when you're not around, they're talking about Joe and Todd the same way.
Oh, absolutely, yes. I had a boss a couple of years back, and this is something else, that you can be a bully boss and not be malicious. I had a boss who she would use her power to institute new rules. They were random. They weren't written down. They weren't like part of our standards, and she would forget about them. She would literally forget day to day which rules she had implemented. And I realized she wasn't doing it to be malicious. She was doing it because it made her feel like she was doing her job. She was
plain work, yeah.
Right. She
making
was
up new laws and rules, and
yeah, and it really is about personal narrative. Like, she just didn't feel like she was doing a good job unless she was being a quote unquote boss.
And then you're taking orders seriously and trying to live by them, but they're impossible to live by all of them because they're changing all the time and they're not enforced.
Right. She would ask why I was doing a certain type of paperwork at a certain time, and I'm like, you put this law down a week ago, and she's like, oh, that's right, I did. So you can have a boss that is a bully who doesn't realize it, and it's not even malicious. That's possible.
They're not always clinch fists, 4-letter word swearing. They can be micro
right.
bullies.
That all came from Safe at Hopkins, which is a site to identify workplace bullying. I encourage anyone who thinks they're being bullied at work to go to that website. It's also going to be linked in our show notes. So, Todd, we've talked about how you possibly were a bully from time to time. Were you ever bullied at work?
Oh, absolutely.
How did that usually manifest?
It manifests when you first get the job. They're talking really good to you. I was in the car business for many years and worked as a manager. And then it's almost like it's this courting thing that as soon as they get you to work there, then they change everything. They change how they pay you. They change how they talk to you. They change your schedule. And you go from being fairly pursued to, what have you done for me lately?
Right. Once they get the ring on you.
Exactly. And it's demoralizing. It's exhausting.
Do you think men or women bully more in the workplace?
I think men are bad, or probably worse human beings than women overall.
Okay.
You can tell me it's neutral general?
No. I don't have the statistics for it in front of me, but there is strong evidence in a couple of articles that women might not do it as much, but they select who they're going to bully a little bit more than men do.
One of the biggest bullying things that's really affected me deeply is when I'm not heard at work. When it seems like whatever I've seen or noticed, or I take it to the boss or try to implement it, and it's like I'm not smart enough or valued enough to even be heard.
Right. Yeah, not being listened to. That wraps back into our fairness, definitely.
What about you? Besides the changing rules, when have you been bullied at work?
Inconsistent laws being put down or inconsistent rules is one thing, but I've also noticed a strong tendency. I had a couple of bosses who they kind of wanted to push punishments onto other people. Like I'm sure everybody's had this happen, but they would have a higher up come down on them, and then they would go back to their team and say, we all need to improve in this. And it's like, no, you have been mishandling things. That's not on us.
Yeah. Let's share the blame.
Exactly, blame sharing. Yeah. So, as far as women bullying in the workplace, this comes from a Forbes article, and it's called "Women Bullied at Work. Here's Why Your Female Boss Dislikes You." According to this article, they found that Workplace Bullying Institute found women bully other women up to 80% of the time.
What?
So they are picking their targets, and the target they're picking is usually other women.
But knowing that women already discriminate enough, again, in the workplace, and them being discriminated against, you would think they would build up. They'd not bully female employees, right? Yeah,
like they'd reach a hand down and try to assist each other, or that they would try to limit their bullying because so many men are doing it for them.
Yeah, exactly. Against them already.
Right. They have a link in here. They just say that other studies have found that women who report other women experience greater frequency of bullying and abuse and job sabotage. So once the bullying starts, it just kind of keeps steamrolling. Why do you think women would bully other women at work?
I don't know if it's because if they see them as a threat or if they're being bullied too. I think a lot of it's that is how you're treated, how the structure of the company is, and what is allowed and what's not.
Right. I think that in part that's definitely that. But I also think it's needing to feel like you've earned your seat at the table.
Okay. Showing your significance.
Yeah, I think a lot of women bosses are trying to show that they can be as tough as the guys at work, and so they're turning that aggression onto the women below them.
It can be a fine line between tough and mean.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. You can have a female boss be the boy named Sue. That's totally a thing that can happen.
I have had the experience in my commission sales careers of having women who I'm very good friends with, and I've always had a lot of female friends in my life. And then they'll have a couple of good sales months, and then their ego blows up, and they don't talk to me even the same. They talk down to me.
Okay.
And I've had that happen a lot of times. It's always disappointing.
Well, if it ever made you feel like you had like this was a conspiracy theory that was happening, Forbes apparently has your back, so they agree with you. So, we have sort of looked into identifying bullies at work. I was wondering if we could talk about how the France Telecom implemented their bullying strategy, because I want to know what workplace, like not just allowing, but encouraging bullying. What does that look like?
Well, France Telecom, I'll have to go back a little bit. So France Telecom was a state-run government entity, but there was a big change. They did not see the digital revolution coming. They were ill prepared for it. So their profits just plummeted. So the state said, "Hey guys, you need to take this public. We need to take this private. We don't want to support this anymore. But you're losing too much money." So there was that big pressure. $50 billion in debt, and they're being pushed out of this tax money haven where they can screw up as much as they want.
So as a entity unprepared for the future, they kind of sort of fell on tough times.
Now, what's funny to me about that's exactly right, Joe, is that the people that got them in this position were not the workers. It was the leaders.
Okay.
Being ill prepared for a digital thing is on you. You're supposed to be running the show.
Right. Your workplace employees, they're not supposed to be your oracles. That's for the bosses to plan out.
Oh, I just didn't see this coming. You're not paying attention to your own industry?
Right.
You're the top for a reason. Okay. Now, what's so funny about this, and it's not funny at all, it's very tragic, and it'd probably be not just in France, but anywhere in the world. Do you know what finally brought all this to light?
I would think or hope the suicides are what did it, but...
You would think. So no one in leadership stood up. No one in human resources stood up. Remember, there's 100,000 employees. This is a big company.
Mm-hmm.
They just let the beatings continue. It didn't come to light until 30 people died, and the media picked it up.
Okay. So
because then the stock price is going down. So sadly, it took that. 30 people died in the prime of their lives. Good tax-paying citizens.
Right.
Now, Lombard, the CEO of this, was forced to step down in 2010, a few months after the suicides hit the news. And he was arguing that he was battling to save France Telecom from bankruptcy. So he said, "Listen, I'm trying to save you people."
So he thinks he's saving the company, but he's discounting the people he is bullying into leaving, though.
Well said, Joe, and shamelessly. Nobody felt bad. I mean, all the executives and top managers that when this all hit so what happened is, and this was the first time in history of at least the country, that corporate people were going to go to a criminal trial for how they treated people. So this was a big thing to change laws for France and the whole world, that if you bully people bully and abuse them to the fact that they commit suicide, you're held criminally
accountable.
Exactly.
Yeah, we kind of give CEOs and bosses a total pass. Like we would let them do almost anything toughness-wise. We call it tough, and we let them do it because it's for the benefit of the company as a whole, right?
Right. And at the end of the day, in the courthouse, when they were all going to court, there was only 7 of them that actually had charges brought against them.
Well, before we reveal whether or not they were charged and what they were charged with, do you want to talk about how to become tough?
Yeah, I want to be tougher than I am now. I'm a pushover now.
Yeah, that's my first thought when I think of doing a podcast with Todd. Is I'll do a podcast with that pushover. We want to end the show by basically telling people how to be positively tough, like how to really get that grit without becoming a bully. So I tried to find it from the best sources I could find. I went to PBS and I found an article, How to Build Mental Toughness. And this comes from a really interesting source. This comes from the U.S. military got together with the University of Pennsylvania, and they started working with their psych wing, their psychology department. And the idea was they were going to roll out a new program for the entire U.S. military that would be they would institute sort of a training system for mental toughness.
That sounds great.
Yeah, so
we want our soldiers to be tougher, mentally tougher.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they've got a tough job, so they need to be able to match that mentally. So this is from their article that they have on PBS, and this is sort of like the information they found, the University of Pennsylvania, by working with the military. They say that mental toughness comes from thinking like an optimist. And that's something we already mentioned with our 4 pieces of mental toughness. They say, quote, "People who don't give up have a habit of interpreting setbacks as temporary, local, and changeable." They also mention in this article that the people who encounter adversity, they think to themselves that it's going to go away quickly. It's not this one situation, and I can do something about it. And I like to imagine the France Telecom employees, if they had even one of those 3 in their mind, they may have been able to do something. They may have sought help.
And if they could have just hung in there a little bit longer,
yeah,
some of the lives could have been saved.
Exactly. Do you know the cheesy saying that's like on every middle-aged woman has this on her wall? It's live, laugh, love, and it's like stitched onto pillows and it's in picture frames.
I buy those at Ross. You hang them up on the wall. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I want to magically replace all of those in the country with the following 3 things: it's going away quickly, it's just this one situation, and you can do something about it.
Stoics be damned.
Yeah, exactly. So, the sergeants that they were talking to during this study, they asked them to analyze their sort of beliefs and emotions about failure, and to avoid describing failure as permanent, pervasive, or out of control. And the fun thing for me, we'll do another episode on this later, but we had an episode about rejection where we talk about emotional granularity, that the smaller and more detailed and isolated you can make your emotions, the more defined you can get them. Like even to the point where you look up a thesaurus to find out exactly what emotion you're feeling, the better you will feel and the quicker you come out of rejection or pain. It looks like it's very similar for toughness, that if you can identify that something is temporary and that you can do something about it, your toughness increases like tenfold. So that's something to keep in mind is the more emotionally mature people, the people that can handle the most, a lot of it just comes from them being able to identify the situation for what it is.
And in my heart, Joe, I've always known that bullies at work, that's the only place they're able to bully. And it really is an insecurity. They can't do that with their friends or family.
Right.
Only with us underlings.
Yes, they only get that from the people at work, basically. So we're going to jump around a bit. So we know how to build toughness now. We know how to use those 3 tools. We're going to look at what happens if we are the bully. We mentioned times where Todd might have been the bully. And on very rare occasion, I have been given the keys to power at work, and I am a tyrant.
Joe is the most patient, kind man I've ever met, just for the record.
Well, that's because I take it out on my employees if I ever get a chance. I'm kidding, of course, but how do we identify bullying in ourselves? And this is from a Forbes article called "Are You a Bully and Don't Even Know It?" One thing they say in the article is that a lot of bullies, they simply don't want to know that if you bully people and it's part of your personality and that you've been doing it for a long time, you oftentimes don't want to see that in yourself.
And I'll tell you one way that you camouflage this. You'll call yourself, oh, I tell it like it is. And sometimes people don't like that.
Yeah. The people who say I tell it like it is, that usually comes with an asterisk of this person's also a major jerk. They're telling it like it is because that's their bullying style. Have you ever met like little kid tyrants, like little bullies, where it's like, oh, you're going to be a troublemaker when you get older?
Fun-sized bullies, and when you grow up and get big, we're live in fear of you.
Exactly. This article talks a little bit about that. They bring up the idea that you can come from households where bullying is acceptable behavior, where it's a completely legit strategy for getting what you want. Which is why
status at home. You see it at home, so you go to school and try to capture it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, if your parents or your brother and sister have taught you how to become the lead dog in a hierarchy is to be a bully, then you take that tool. Why not? It works. And that's actually what they say in this article. They mention that anytime there's a hierarchical order where rank matters, bullying becomes part of the social order. It just sort of comes out. Now, one of the phrases we used earlier was the idea that you would be wanting to get a seat at the table. And we really don't want to discourage that. If you are in the business world, or you're working in sales or corporate or something, or if you're in France Telecom, absolutely fight for yourself, be tough, get that seat at the table, be around the boardroom, get your meal, as they say.
Yeah, ask for that promotion, ask for that corner office. You've earned it. You deserve it.
Absolutely. But just take a moment to ask yourself, is the goal of you getting power or control to use that control or power? If you're doing it for status or money, that's perfectly fine. But when you are doing it because you want to implement a new set of rules every week for people to try to follow, then maybe you are being a bit more of a bully than you need to be. So, speaking of being a bit more of a bully than the occasion calls for, did our man Didier Lombard, did he ever sort of have that realization? Did he repent when he was in court?
Did he have that, I'm so sorry, and start crying?
Right.
I watched a lot of clips from the news stations over there at the time. None of the 7 that were on trial even looked a tiny bit remorseful. But to be fair, my French is not that great.
Right.
They looked bored. They looked inconvenienced. They didn't have any grief or any shame for their behavior. They thought they were doing their job the right way and that they were being persecuted wrongfully.
Wow.
Yeah, it's disgusting.
So they could really use this "Am I a Bully" article, huh?
They need to listen to this podcast. They're still around, all these people. This is such a huge story. I'm surprised I hadn't heard of it until we doing this study.
Me too. Yeah, that was my biggest shocker is when I read this, I just sort of grabbed my head and I was like, holy cow.
And from a first world country like France that we think good things of.
Right.
Now, there was a huge press conference, and it was really the mean, cruel CEO bosses against the little guy, the employees. And it really seemed like they found him guilty. And it really seemed like a win for the little guy. Like, we got him, right?
Right. We finally proved that you can take a real bully and you can prosecute them.
Not only did it not feel remorseful, not only was there not that comeuppance, we were wrong like there is in all the movies we watch. They were sentenced to a year in jail. 9 months suspended, 3 months in jail, and get this, a $16,000 fine. So
they spent a single quarter, 3 months in jail, and they basically paid for a used car.
And then their attorney, right after it was said, he went out and said, we're appealing.
Wow.
Now, don't feel too bad for our Didier Lombard here. So after his month in jail or anything, he was fired from the company, but they kept him on as a consultant for $600,000 a year.
He works for the same company as a consultant now?
For $600,000 a year.
Wow.
One of this quote, and this was almost brought me to tears, was an 18-year-old daughter of one of the people that committed suicide, screamed out during the court case, "You killed my father. Why?"
Did he have an answer?
No, there was no response and there was no emotion. But my response is that those CEOs, their wealth was more important to them than anyone's life.
Right. Do you mind if I am the optimist for at least one episode, for one time in my life?
I was going to say the first time ever in your life.
But, okay, so that's an unsatisfying slap on the wrist for our bully CEOs that drove people to suicide. But this does prove that one civilized country, at least once, has criminally prosecuted CEOs for bullying.
That's a good point, Joe, because in this country with Ponzi schemes, and those weren't serious when they first started persecuting those. They would get like 6 months or whatever. But now you get 600 years.
Yeah.
So they don't mess around. So you got to start somewhere.
So this might be the start. This might be the beginning of the snowball for persecuting bully tactics.
The real miracle is the stoic Joe has been turned into an optimist.
Oh,
over
no.
one show.
Well, that's the end of Re-Engineered You, folks.
Do you believe in miracles? Every one of us walking the earth has to get tough at some point. The gentlest soul you've met at the supermarket has survived something. The most passive people you come across have conquered unimaginable challenges. But toughness isn't just an honorary virtue in the human repertoire. It's a requirement. And toughness, grit, pays off in the end. Even the core values of toughness, hope, optimism, perseverance, and resilience are each themselves a key component to being the best possible you. Toughness with dignity is, ultimately, an umbrella virtue. And yet, workplace bullies, managers, and CEOs sure like to hide behind toughness whenever they start laying people off. They talk about toughness when they cancel bonuses or when they sell off company stocks. And we, the public, are perfectly willing to watch them bully their own labor. We call it toughness. We give them a pass to be mean in the name of profit. The best way you can arm yourself against meanness masquerading as toughness is to help you identify toughness by asking, am I being bullied because someone likes wielding power over me? Or am I being worked by a tough boss who would never flaunt their power if they could avoid it? And if you happen to be the one wielding the power, ask yourself the same question. Did you punish the employee because you can or because you need results? For all of you working stressful jobs out there, please, if a bullying boss has you on edge and you feel like it might be too much, seek help. You are not your job. You are not your position. Seek help. Contact a lawyer or a third-party mediator or a healthcare professional. You can't always leave it to human resources to solve bullying. Take it from France Telecom employees who sought help from the head of human resources, Oliver Barabo, who was also one of the managers found guilty and sentenced for bullying. You've been listening to the Re-Engineered You. Thank you so much for listening to this show. You mean the world to us. We have a new episode every week.
You can connect with us at www.re-engineeredyou.com, where we have research links, show notes, and blog articles for every episode. We also appreciate feedback, and we love spirited debates.
We're not experts in anything, but we've got an opinion on everything.